Welcome to the Drink Tank on Edible Radio. And now here's your host, Gibson Thomas.
Hi, and Happy New Year 2012. We are kicking off. This is the Drink Tank with your host, Gibson Thomas. Today, we are very excited to bring you our guest, Natalie McLean. Natalie is a sommelier as well as an author. Her second book has just been released. It's called Unquenchable, A Tipsy Quest for the World's Best Bargain Wines. Many of you may have read her first book, Red, White, and Drunk All Over, which was very highly acclaimed and has won many awards. Natalie, welcome.
Thanks, Gibson. Great to be here.
I have been the recipient of your email newsletters for a while and always enjoy your style and your tips. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what your special niche is in the world of wine writing.
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, I do have an e-newsletter, and I guess we just topped about 129,000 subscribers over the holidays. And, if any of your listeners are interested, they can join. It's free at nataliemclean.com. And I really did start online with the wine writing about 12 years ago because I came from the world of high tech, so I was kind of an early believer in the merging of wine and online. I saw the natural fit because wine, as you know, Gibson, can be an information-intensive kind of purchase. Doesn't have to be, but, if you want to learn more about wine, it's so easy online, and now, of course, with social media. So I've done a lot in those spheres. But apart from that, my true passion for wine writing is due to the people I meet. I just love the people, the winemakers in particular, but also others in the industry like sommeliers and liquor store staff, because they have this passion, and often they have really interesting stories to tell because they often come in from other careers or other backgrounds, and so I think it's the people that really draws me to writing about wine.
Well, I'll say that one of the lines that I really struck me in Unquenchable in reading it was Wolf Blass or Bloss. Yeah. How do you say it? From Australia? That's right,
Blass. Yeah, Wolf Blass.
From one of the first sort of, blockbuster winemakers to hit the U.S. market with the Australian wines. And he really said that he realized that the winemaker is integral to the marketing of the product, the human face of the wine, and that people like to do business with people and not products. And I think it's so true. And I know that you read the various edible magazines, and in my work as a publisher of Edible Moran and Wine Country, I really believe that if you show people, readers, the face and the story behind that cheese, behind that lamb at the market, behind that tomato and that lettuce, it makes a huge difference.
Yes, I agree. I think what's on our plate and in our glass these days is personal, and having a relationship, knowing where that wine came from or that food came from, well, an important part of that is who made this. So if you do want to know, what's in the bottle or in the food, you do have to trace it back to its roots, and that often does involve a story about a person and if you're lucky, a relationship with that person. And I just think it brings wine and food to life when you can tell the story of the person who created it, because often, they had dreams, they had challenges in establishing a winery, they have a certain style, a certain artistic or aesthetic signature that they're trying to express, and all of that, I think, makes the experience of drinking the wine that much more interesting.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I think that I loved your book and the way that you have the progression of the book set up. You start with a very robust, the wines from Australia, the Shiraz, and set that up with a Sunday dinner of roast beef or meat lovers pizza. I love that. And then progress through the week, ending with a Sunday lunch. And you travel all over the world and really, tell stories about the different winemakers and your experiences. And I think doing that, it's been a revelation to me lately. you think about wine pricing. Well, is one wine priced at $15 and one wine priced at $1,500 because it's just better? Because Robert Parker says it's better, or Natalie McLean says it's better. You know, is that the truth? And what I've come really to find out, there's so many different factors that go into pricing a wine. There are labor costs, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, just the different regions and why their wines might be priced differently.
Well, sure. There are so many cost factors that go into wines, but at the highest level, there are certain regions that have natural advantages, and those tend to be the warm climates where they're not fighting mildew and rot and a lot of diseases and pests. So if you think about Chile, Argentina, even California, although there's other reasons why now California wines, especially from Napa and Sonoma, are more expensive. They have a lovely climate, so what you're looking for perhaps is more the southern regions now that don't have the badge, so Paso Robles and Santa Cruz Mountains and so on. But back to the point, the climate will help quite a bit with cost reduction because there won't be a lot of crop loss, a lot of unripened grapes that don't make for good wine. So those regions will have the advantage. And then another reason will be trying to establish a foothold in the market. If you don't have those badge names that Tuscany, Piedmont, Napa, Bordeaux, Burgundy all have, you're going to have to price very competitively in order to get people to try your wine. And so, you know, one of the tips in the book is go south. So instead of Bordeaux and Burgundy in France, the northern regions of France, go down to the Languedoc or Provence where they have dry rosé, but also the wines are incredibly inexpensive for the quality. And then, of course, there's a whole range of other decisions that go into making wine, from how expensive was your vineyard land to, you know, how pricey were the barrels? Did they come from France? Are you cropping? Like, are you taking off a lot of grapes off the vine at harvest time to concentrate the flavors in the remaining grapes? But in doing so, you increase your costs because you're not going to make as much wine and so on. So all of that goes into the prices of wines. But then there's, I think, the really interesting intangible factors, as you mentioned, a critic score, rarity, how collectible is it, will it resell on the market, that sort of thing. All those intangible price factors also go into to the cost.
Mm-hmm. Well, I thought one of the things, I learned so much from your book. Not only was it just a great read, but really full of hard information in there that was really, a lot of it was new to me. Like, for instance, you know, the different regulations in, say, the older European wine producing countries like France, where they don't allow you to blend and you have to keep the varietals pure. And there are all sorts of really intensive governmental regulations or wine governing body regulations. And the winemakers in Australia are saying, you know, we don't have those. People value consistency in our wines, and we're able to blend among different vineyards and give the people that consistency. And, you know, I think some wine purists out there may say, well, we don't want the vintage, you know, year to year to taste the same.
Right, exactly. And it's all about what are you looking for in your taste experience, just as it is in food. Some people don't like spicy, and you know, so I would never say that blended is you know, a lower quality wine than unblended. Bordeaux blends 5 grapes, but they're considered among the best wines in the world. But you're right that certain the old world countries, and we think France, Italy, Spain, Germany, and so on, have far more regulations and rules because they've been in the winemaking game for a long time. And those rules were put in place to protect kind of the signature of the region in terms of how the wines taste, but it does also increase the cost.
Absolutely. Well, you know, in the U.S. now, there are so many wine-producing regions. My sister publication, Edible Finger Lakes, Edible East End, out in Long Island, you know, in the Hamptons, and I know you saw a program you had done on the wines of New York State. There are really so many regions. I mean, I know even in the South now, people are producing wine. Virginia has a big wine producing region now. I mean, yeah. Do you follow wines all over the U.S. now?
I try to, and it's because there's so many exciting new developments. I believe that almost every state now makes wine. I think maybe with the exception only of, Alaska and Hawaii may even produce it. I don't know, but it was an astonishing number. 49 or 50 states produce wine. And, the regions are really developing. So it's no longer the big three only, California, Washington, and Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
Texas has a huge and vibrant industry. It's just a matter of the challenge is getting samples and getting down there and out there to the different areas to see what's going on, because there's nothing like having your feet on the ground.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so tell me, you have an app that people can take with them into the wine store?
Absolutely, yeah. The mobile app is free, and it's available on iTunes for iPhone or iPod Touch, as well as Android and BlackBerry. And you download it, and you can scan a barcode, and up comes the tasting note or the review of the score for the wine. There is a matcher with thousands of matches, so you can either start with the wine and get a food match, or you can start with the food, like I'm having roast chicken. Okay, well, here are your choices. One might be a California Chardonnay. Click on that, and you'll get the latest Chardonnays, California Chardonnay, say, that I've recommended. So people find it very helpful. There's also a virtual cellar, so you can record your purchases as you buy them and keep track of what you've consumed and what you haven't. But these mobile apps, I think, really, really make sense for the wine category, because most of our decisions about buying wine are made outside the home. So we're either in the liquor store or at a restaurant, and that's when people really value having that information right in their hands.
Absolutely. Well, let me take a quick break and remind people that they are listening to the Drink Tank on Edible Radio. And today our guest is Natalie McLean, sommelier and author. We're talking about her latest book, Unquenchable, A Tipsy Quest for the World's Best Bargain Wines. And Natalie, tell us what, I know you talk about the concept of bargain, and bargain to you doesn't necessarily mean cheap.
Right, exactly. And that's an important concept, I think. Bargain to me is the ratio or the relationship between price and quality. And for me, when it comes to wine, that means getting more taste than what you paid for. So I look for wines that might be $10 to $20 that taste like $20 to $40. That, to me, that $10 to $20 range, even $10 to $15, is a real sweet spot these days, where you can get some really terrific bargains, because technology has also decreased costs and increased the quality of wines from around the world. Winemakers are much more knowledgeable about which grapes work in their soils, and there's more competition than ever in the liquor store for your wine dollar. So the wines are really priced competitively these days, new producers and so on. So I think all of that means that you can find some really terrific bargains, that over-deliver against their price.
Well, I love in the book, someone asked you if you can find a good wine for under $10, and your response was, if you really just want to get your tongue wet.
That's one of my saucier moods, yes.
Well, I think for someone like me who's obviously dedicated to local and sustainably produced food, is that really your goal should not be the cheapest food you can find. Yes, right. You can eat cheaply at McDonald's, but what you're putting into your body, first of all, doesn't taste as good as something that you can buy locally and prepare, or have a chef that's locally who has prepared that for you. And it's certainly the health consequences down the road are great and well exceed the cheapness of the food right now. And that's not really the highest goal. And do you really want a $10 bottle of wine, or do you want something you're saying that's a bargain? I think that's exactly right.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, to a certain extent, you do get what you pay for. If you go too low, there has to be a certain investment in the production and quality of food or beverage product. So I think you're trying to find that optimization between, what's local, a good investment in it, and what you're paying.
Well, and what you want the winemaker to have taken care of his grapes, to have taken care of his or her people who are harvesting the grapes, and the people who are helping make that wine. And all of that, costs money and is a value to it, as well as just making wine that tastes delicious. And if you're like me, most consumers, I walk into the liquor store or the grocery store, local Whole Foods have wine out here, and it's overwhelming. There are so many wines on the shelf. So, someone like you that takes a very pragmatic approach, I think is invaluable for people, because you just sort of stand there and stare at the...
that's great, because, wine is a different purchase. Because, unlike a book, you can kind of flip through the first chapter or try on a dress. You can't taste wine, at least usually not legally, before you buy it. So there's a reason there are wine critics and not orange juice critics. But that's also why, the app is useful, and why people do want shopping lists of wine recommendations, because, there are more than 1 million wine producers every year. Each of them are probably producing an average of anywhere from, 5 to 10 different wines when you think of all the different grapes and blends. And the product changes every year with the vintage, the weather. It's unlike, a book that's republished year after year. So no wonder people feel a little bit intimidated and are looking for guidance.
Well, I think it's great. And I think, don't you have a place on your website where your readers can write in their comments and tasting notes?
Yes, anybody can add their tasting notes to either wines I've already reviewed or new wines that they've discovered, and we publish those because, I do believe in the community commenting, and it makes it a more valuable resource for everybody.
Well, I think it's really interesting that you may have some people who really respect you, but your favorite wine is not their favorite, or your taste profile. And you think, I have to believe what the experts do. And because someone like Robert Parker says, it's got this many points, I have to like it. And then you don't necessarily like it when you try it, and you think, I don't have an educated wine palate. I don't know what's good. And I think you would say that's not true. If you like it, you like it.
Yeah, exactly. You really are the expert on your own palate, on your own sense of taste. And, a critic can only point you in the right direction, or, really the best way to go about it is to find someone whose taste lines up with yours, because, you don't want to be drinking things you don't enjoy. And the same goes for the whole sort of realm of food and wine matching. You may love a big honkin' Australian Shiraz, and you just don't want a light white that might go better with that fish dish. Well, have a bun in between. I mean, it's about pleasure and your own personal taste. So I always advise that, too, not to go too stringent with what the so-called critics say.
Right. Well, tell us, I really do think people will love reading Unquenchable. It's just got so many great stories, and the personalities in it are amazing. Was there one real standout in all your travels of someone that you met that you want to mention?
Well, you mentioned Wolf Blass. For sure, he would be on the list. But there were so many memorable people. If I think about, Peter Mayle, although he's not a winemaker, it was a real treat to meet him, the author of A Year in Provence, because it was a nice note to end the book, because we talked about how life can be a series of edible adventures, were his words, and that you never finish. You're always discovering. It's a way of opening your world through, food and wine, and I'm a firm believer, and I think there's so many of us these days that is the way in which we discover our world and meet people and form relationships, and I think it's the most marvelous way to do it, too.
Well, I have the quote on the back of my business card that I've always loved, the MFK Fisher quote that said, "There's more than a communion of our bodies when bread is broken and wine is drunk." And it is so true. You sit around the table with all these people from all over the world, and it's hard not to develop a connection with them over a meal, and certainly a glass of wine, and a glass of wine that they have produced. And that's what I think your book brings to people, is that experience. I know I certainly feel a lot more. I wish I knew the people who produce Grange wines of Australia.
Yeah, we all do. It'd be nice to have an inside with that wine.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I really appreciate your time today, and I know people are going to enjoy the book and then be able to follow you on your website. And what is your website?
It's NatalieMcLean.com, and they're welcome to join the free newsletter, to get the apps. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook, of course, and all the links to all of that are on NatalieMcLean.com. But it's been a real pleasure talking with you, Gibson.
Great. Thank you, Natalie, and maybe we'll talk to you again.
Absolutely. Cheers.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Okay.
You've been listening to The Drink Tank on Edible Radio. For more information, visit edibleradio.com. This podcast is a production of Edible Communities. All rights reserved.